Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where the mind and gym come together to help you live your best life. Hosted by two fitness professionals and your personal trainers, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie. Welcome back, folks. This week we're going to be talking about failing, shoulder mobility or bench mobility, and fasting. Before we get going, we're going to talk about our weekly workout, and we're going to save our food for thought for the end. So, weekly workout. We're pressing this week. So, we're going to be doing around the worlds and scap retraction for a little warm up. So, you're going to be laying on your back, and you're going to have a light weight, like even a 2-pound weight, 5-pound weight, 10-pound weight, what have you. And you're going to lay on your back, and you're going to reach your hands over your head, and you're going to keep your shoulder blades on the bench, and you're in a windmill type motion. You're going to extend your arms out towards the sides, almost like you're coming down from a jumping jack, and you're bringing your hands towards your hips, and then you come out again and up and overhead. So you get a nice good shoulder mobility warm up. At the same time, you're activating your chest, and you're keeping those scaps retracted back. But then adding to that, you're going to find a band, some type of way to squeeze your scaps together. Maybe it's a single arm cable scap retraction, or a reverse fly with some light cables with a scap retraction. And then we'll get into a dumbbell flat press, a TRX row, because every time we press, we want to make sure we're doing some pulling, because you're only a best presser when you have a really strong back and a foundation with which you will be pressing from. Then you'll do a half kneeling landmine press. I love that movement. Eric does too, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Love
the landmine.
Much more functional in terms of the way we use our chest in a lot of activities, sports, or everyday living, versus just your typical barbells. And then some weighted planks. That's our weekly workout. So again, around the world and scap retraction to start off, then some dumbbell flat pressing, then a TRX row, some body weight, strengthening those scaps again and your back again, because that's where you're pushing from. Half kneeling landmine press, and then weighted planks. And for our first topic, failing. It's a nice taboo topic, because who loves to fail? Not many people. Everyone usually hates failing. And rightfully so, in terms of you should not accept failing as the end point. I love the quote. They talk a lot about how Albert Einstein failed calculus, and how J.D. Salinger, who wrote Catcher in the Rye, one of the most influential authors of all time, he dropped out of English. Michael Jordan didn't make his high school basketball team, and the list goes on and on. But they talk about how success is not final and failure is not fatal. And I love the quote, and it was on Eric and I, so at Equinox, Eric and I had our faces on a little placard, and we had to pick a quote for our placard. And mine, I picked, failing is success in progress. Oh man, I love that quote, because it's just so true. Failing isn't an end point. It doesn't mean you received an F. It's a path that you allow yourself to go on to expose your weaknesses, expose your impurities, and forge yourself into a hardened, stronger, faster, better, more efficient human.
And that's what you want. And that quote right there is probably the one of the best quotes I've heard about failure, because that's what you need. Success is going to be your desired outcome. But what is going to get you to that desired outcome? It's going to be how many times you can learn from that failure, or learn from a situation where you didn't succeed 100%. Now, I think there's different degrees of failures. You know, you can fail a math class and flunk out and you get an F and you got to repeat it. But sometimes you're let's take Albert Einstein. You know, he failed out of, what'd you say, calculus?
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
great. But what about once he passed it, and then all his works from there on out? How many failures do you think he had of equations, of experiments that he said, "Hey, this is my hypothesis. I'm going to try it. Oh, this failed, it didn't work out. This failed and didn't work out." But each time he failed, he learned something. He learned from a certain algorithm that didn't fit there, and then
yeah.
once you put it all together and maybe take a step back, he learned, okay, well, if I can take this and put together, I mean, now you look, he's one of the most successful people there is in his field. So failures can be small, or a percentage of what success looks like, but it's getting you to that 100% success rate. So if you don't have failures, like, how are you going to learn? Failing is basically learning. And if we don't fail a number of times, are we ever really going to learn a good favorable thing, a pattern, a movement, a learned behavior? No.
Well, yeah, it's just so true that um, in order to learn, you have to essentially uh, fail. I mean, if you think about us as young children, as toddlers who are starting to walk, we failed at walking probably hundreds and hundreds of times.
Hmm.
But at no point did we say, "Oh man, I guess I can't walk." We were so primal and unconscious at the time that we didn't have the ability to cry and weep and well, we probably did cry a lot when we
Oh yeah.
failed and fall, but we didn't have the ability to say, "Oh, I shouldn't do this. I don't like failing," because in the end of the day, we're programmed for survival and success. So the object of the game is to win, but there are going to be times that you lose. And
Oh yeah.
if the object of the game is to have a total net sum of more wins than losses, then every loss has the potential for more wins in the future if you look at it correctly. And every failure has the opportunity to create strength in you if you look at it in the right manner and you learn from it and you grow from it. And I love another quote, because we're talking about Albert Einstein here, is people would always say, "Oh, you're a genius. You're a genius," and we don't see all the things that he failed at before he came up with and discovered E equals MC squared. And he would straight up say, "I'm not a genius. I just stick with the problem longer." And that's such a beautiful line because it's not about just being a genius and looking at something and having the right answer right away. It's about sticking with the problem longer and being that child that stands up and falls down, stands up and falls down, fall down 7 times, get up 8. That's just so persistent in trying and isn't demoralized by failures, but is rather um, enthusiastic about them. Because even Kobe Bryant, I remember listening to him on um, Lewis Howes' School of Greatness podcast, and he would say, I got to a point in my career where I looked forward to the failures. I looked forward to the impurities in my work because it heightened a sense of awareness into where I could get better and hone my skills in. And I love that. I love that mindset because you have to, another, this is going to be a quote filled day, I can tell, but amateurs practice something until they get it right, but professionals practice something until they can't get it wrong. And Kobe was a artist into the level of which he practiced something and drilled something and got it so perfect, but he would keep drilling it and keep drilling it to find the impurities, find the imperfections, find the inefficiencies, so he could perfect them and learn from them and grow from them and get better. So failing is so crucial as a species, as a system, as a athlete, as a human, in order to find growth on all fronts.
Right.
You have to embrace failure. You have to embrace that process. And I think too many times we vilify failure or not succeeding at something, but it's it's bigger than that. You have to embrace the failures and not be complacent with them. Not look for the failures as the end point. As okay, I failed, enough is enough. No, that's your vulnerability. That's your strength. Now you have to dig into that and learn from that. So I could talk about this shit for a fucking hour. This shit is amping me up. I'm ready to work out. I hope everyone's hearing that in my voice, because it's just such an important topic. And we talk about it in a really big mindset right now, in sort of a larger scale, a macro scale, but even on a micro scale, in terms of failing in a movement pattern, in a repetition manner. So like in a set, like you want that muscle to fail. You want to reach a point where you really can't do another press in that set, and then drop the weight down and rest for 30 seconds or a minute and a half or 5 minutes, depending on what you're doing for that lift.
Correct. Because when you get to that failure, what does that failure tell your body to do?
Adapt,
Exactly.
grow, improve, push
And
that boulder up the hill further.
And that is the ultimate goal of exercise and movement, is adaptation. So we have these things that we have this state of failure, which is fear. It's not comfortable going to failure. Is it good to fail? Yeah. Does it feel good mentally? No. No one likes to lose. No one likes to be like, hey, you didn't pass this, you didn't do that. But it's needed in life. And that's where, especially when you brought the Kobe, he didn't want to go out and lose, but he wanted to go out and be challenged in a game. So, I mean, he gets 60 minutes in a basketball game to get challenged and to get feared and to reach failure at certain plays. But hopefully at the end of the 60 minutes, he can adapt so much and learn that he doesn't have complete failure and a loss. But if he does have a loss, now he goes back and he has to study, okay, how do I get better so this doesn't happen again? And it's innately built into our system. We're creatures we're creatures of, obviously we don't want to fail. No one likes to fail. It doesn't put a good emotions in our brain. It doesn't stimulate the brain as much as winning or other pleasures do, but it's built into us, right? Purposely, for like, okay, if we didn't get this, what do we have to do to change? Because if you don't change anything, the outcome's still going to be the same. And it's good to be feared every day. Like, you want to have some sort of daily failures to make sure that you're still in line with your goals and your accomplishments are in sight, and you're not just dwindling into this comfort zone. And that's also what's very innate in us, is comfort. We love comfort zones. We love being, oh, there's less stress, I don't have to worry about it, or I have to do minimal effort for this, because innately the body doesn't want to do some of the things we want. It's the mental mindset of willpower that goes through. But if you create this endless comfort zone, you're not ever getting challenged enough. You're never seeking failure or even getting close. You're not going to ever adapt and change. And that's a hard part. That's a big thing you see nowadays, is people are looking for these satisfactions, these pleasures, which I think is great. but they're not willing to accept the failures that come with the other side of it. I mean, you want to talk about moving something up a hill. You either got to bring it up the hill. What's if you don't, you're going to slide back down to the start. I think people want to get to the top, but they don't want to slide back down and start back over. So what do? They either say, I'm going to take the easy way out or quick path up, or I'm just not going to do it at all.
Well, I think I do think to a degree we have been presented. We've done ourselves a disservice. I try to I try to live by Salman Rushdie's line in Midnight's Children, which is to understand a concept you have to swallow the world, and that just means to understand like one person you have to swallow all the world and influences and background and history to really understand how they are where they are now. So if you understand that like we grew up in the great or like our great great grandparents grew up in the Great Depression, and then our grandparents grew up in war times, World War One, Korean War, World War Two, Vietnam, things like that. It was the baby boomers who were our parents who grew up in a peaceful time that just wanted to love and spend time with their children, and women entered the workforce. It was a time of empowerment and freedom and joy and pleasure, and everyone wanted to just be with their kids, and no one wanted to really see their kids struggle and fail. But it is strength. It's a multidimensional love when you have discipline and strictness on someone that you love, and necessarily not doing what is best for you as the caretaker because you feel good just giving them everything they want, but doing what's best for the individual, and teaching them how to cope with their frustration, their emotions, their anger, their fear, their jealousy, and work through that and forge them through those rough times, and be there for them when they fall off their bicycle or things like that, but force them to experience that. And I feel like then you created a culture where we are at now, where we have a large sense of entitlement, and we have a large sense of I don't know how to put this in direct terms, but lack of ability and confidence and strength and vigor.
Almost a lack of drive for those things.
Yeah, lack of drive. It's a good one. That's
And
a good one.
and I 100% agree, and I kind of also think that technology kind of plays a role in this cycle of avoiding failures, because now we see. I mean, I can pull up my phone right here, and I have access to thousands of apps, and you go on these apps and you see all successful people and all this and that. Oh, great! And then there's other apps you can go to that you can basically have anything you want in a matter of seconds, which I think is great. I think technology is great. But if we get too far down into technology, are we actually just suppressing this kind of behavior seeking for pleasure and satisfactions and
Right.
gratifications, that
Right.
when we actually get to failures, it's really hard on our system and we do not know what we're actually looking for. So like, yes, we have on one side we have failures, which is not a good feeling. Hey, you lost that game, you're the starting pitcher, you gave up 5 runs, you let the team down. Yeah, you failed, you lost. I mean, that's not a great feeling. I'll tell anyone that. On the other side, if you pitch a great game and don't give up any runs and you win, that's a great feeling. And the rewards for that stuff is so high. I mean, those higher order like pleasures, they takes and pull so much on the brain, so many areas to recruit. I mean, that's where people strive to be with motivation learning, and the reward pathways are just so much. But when you don't get that and you fail at those things, I mean, that's the opposite. It's a high reward. You're going to get high, like low feeling of failure. And that's a hard thing to digest for a lot of people. But where I think technology kind of brings us almost into this middle area, this gray area of we're never getting to this huge satisfaction, dopamine, neurotransmitter rush. and we're always
Mm.
kind of hanging in the middle. And then when we get into this low, like failure, fear, or just not meeting expectations, I think the needle kind of pushes down that way more, and the chemicals in the brain kind of stay there more, and people do not know how to handle that. And then when they do get that, they're like, I don't want to go there again. I'm going to stay in the needle in the middle. I'm just going to kind of get my regular daily fix. So they're never getting on one end of the neurotransmitter release where we need to be. They're more staying in the middle of the end. And that creates this endless comfort zone. And
And it's, go ahead.
I was just going to finish with, it's a lot. It's about based on how, we're upbringings, and it's not always the parents' faults, but just, how kind of people view themselves in the world. I mean, I think nurturing has a lot to do with it, but you can still change. So, you know, if you're one of those people who kind of they're not sure, find things that are going to excite your gratification reward, things that are going to be costly to you, not monetary wise or like life wise, but if you don't succeed in this, it's going to kind of like it's going to put a hurt on you a little bit. Like it's going to be like, oh man, I failed at this. But then you're going to realize the work ethic it takes to get to that end goal. To and then once you succeed, it's sort of like, hey, I'm standing on the top of the world for a moment. Boom, I got this. What's my next goal? What's my next accomplishment going to be? And I think if we're talking in the weight room or exercise, I mean, lifting weights, hitting new numbers, hitting new reps, hitting new speeds on certain things. That's where you can go test it if you want to. How many reps at bench can you do? How many reps at squats can you do? Or are we trying for new weights? How fast can you run a 100-yard sprint? I mean, that's where you can
Yeah,
see that stuff. And it's
totally.
the stuff like that is a great place to start. Even if you now in this time, even if you do not have a gym, start doing by max push-ups a day. And then the next day do max again, and you're going to see, hey, I'm getting more reps. Yes, you're going to get to failure, but failure is going to be delayed and prolonged. And that's what it becomes over time is you start getting good and learning behaviors, patterns, movements, whatever. And then, okay, failure is going to come a little bit longer. Like in school, hey, you learn simple math, addition, subtraction. Okay, once you start to master that and you failed a little bit, okay, now we're going to throw you into division. Okay, you learned, you failed. Now we're going to throw you into long division. Oh man, you failed big time. But you go back and still learning. And then it's geometry, algebra 2, pre-calc, calculus. I mean, everything's a step. They're expecting you to fail when you go to school because that's how you learn.
Well, they're expecting you to be challenged because they want you to find your little failure points. And I think a couple things I want to unpack there is, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm just looking at things more of a systematic approach
No, I
and
totally
and
agree. I
seeing
didn't.
how things have ended up where they are now, and
Yes.
kind of back to what you were saying about how you reach those neuromuscular or those neuro patterns for firing and learning. Usually by the first time someone gets to those failure points, they're a little bit older and it's uncomfortable and it's new and it's novel, and they don't realize that with repetition it won't be as scary, it won't be as dangerous, it won't be as daunting on your system, it won't be as demoralizing on your system. But you have to overcome that, and that's something that you have to, almost like training wheels, continue to strengthen and enhance. And um yeah, like you're saying, though, back to what you're saying, just like find different ways to challenge yourself and find little checkpoint goals. Failing in your set, in your workout, in your goal selection. Fail to find failure push-ups. Like you said, your body weight, because a lot of people don't have access to a gym in these times.
And I would
and
say what
and it might be
year?
like you do 50 push-ups after you did this full workout, and next time you did it you got to 51, and you're just finding your successes through those failure points, and you're forcing your body to make those adaptations. Because if you just gave enough stimulus to your body where it could do it always, you're never going to create what's called an allosteric response. And eventually, that's what we're trying to do, is create a training effect. And if we operate at this comfortable level, we think of comfort as our homeostasis, of homeostatic. So it's our ability to bring our body back to baseline, to comfort. So we have to stretch that homeostatic level and create that allosteric response. And that's that failure point. That's that point where the body says, okay, we got to fix something here. We got to adapt. We got to grow. We got to strengthen this area of the body. We got to improve this system. We got to upregulate more vitamin D next time, or create more acetylcholine, or whatever it may be, to make the body in a biological and systematic way of making yourself stronger and better every day, because that's how we're proactive. And that's what we talk about with terms of being prepared for something like a pandemic, is you're trying to make your body stronger and more efficient and more diverse on all fronts, from a histological way to a metabolic way to a neuromuscular function way to hormone functions to brain function, all these different systems that you're trying to improve and uh, throw different situations and scenarios at it to fail at, so that it gets better, and be the best human that you can be. I mean, that's what we talk about here at Think Fitness Life, is just trying to live your best life and put your best body and brain forward. And you have to do that through embracing the failures in your workouts. That's the best way to do it.
And to go along with your point, if we're creating, or we see culturally this ongoing strive to eliminate failure out of lifestyle, doesn't matter what
Mm.
age, that is going to have a big effect on growth and development of every single human being on the face of this earth. If we continue to try to go down this no failure, easy route path in life, and I 100% agree with you on that one.
Yeah, yeah. We have to be responsible and recognize that we get stronger and smarter, and as a culture, and technology has its place, but you got to balance it out, and maybe recognize. I came to the realization a while ago that life is just all these seesaws of balancing, and your one day your strength is your next day's weakness. And there's a quote that applies here, that the fastest thing to an organization stopping is doing what it did yesterday for success for tomorrow. And it's so true, because you have to always constantly realize that when you take a step in one direction to improve a strength, you're exposing something as a weakness. And you have to always adapt to that and constantly look at what's the next thing you need to bring up and improve on. Because it's just so true that, like, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So you have to continually keep everything in checks and balances and look to improve on all fronts, and look at, okay, so we improve this technology, and we don't need to necessarily be out roaming about and hunting for our meals. So okay, I'm getting less physical activity in. That means I need to be more intense with my gym activity, right? Or I just got a car and I'm no longer walking to work, so okay, I need to uptick my cardio. Like, it's just little tweaks like that into our routine that we got to be mindful of, to make sure that we're always challenging our systems, and not getting too comfortable. And on the consequently, we also want to make sure we're not just pushing ourselves to failure and exhaustion all the time, or we're going to risk going the route of hypercortisolemia and actually creating more fat in the body, more stress on the system, and getting law of diminishing returns. And you're actually going to make your system worse over time. So there's definitely a balance point here, and in all fronts, there's always going to be that spectrum. But we've talked about failing for about 30 minutes now, and I love it. But I think we should move on to bench mobility, shoulder mobility. So
Big player when it comes to pressing, especially horizontal pressing, or as most people know, bench pressing, movements like push-ups plays a role. And if we kind of rewind back into our workout of the day, we will notice that we prime the benching with some scapular work, which in layman's terms, those are the shoulder blades. So shoulder blades are two wonderful things, almost basically scoops that sit on the back of the rib cage that help push air in and out of our rib cage and help our rib cage turn. Big players, and if we do not respect those, we can run into a lot of issues when we start putting into dynamic compound movements such as the bench press.
What I see, and I would assume probably what you see too, because it's pretty common, is just this upper kyphotic, this upper rounding of the upper back. It's a kyphotic posture. The shoulders are internally rotated, and we call it upper cross syndrome. And it's due to holding backpacks on our back, or purses, or typing at a computer, but just being forward moving people. I really think what happens is, because if we're standing in an anatomical position to walk, it's technically controlled falling. We pick one foot up and then lean our head forward, and gravity allows that teeter point from our center of gravity to make us fall forward. We eventually become more anteriorly rounded, and you can think about how you see older people almost looking down at the ground as they're walking. It creates this poor shoulder mobility, and you have to really open up your chest. We have to do things extra to really open up that chest and build strength in our back, so we can have better shoulder mobility, so that we don't get impingements or rotator cuff tears or labrum tears and things like that. I mean, I feel like I see a lot of shoulder injuries. Oh, do you see a lot of shoulder injuries?
Yes. And when I see, from my experience and what I've noticed, I see more people putting shoulder injuries, not as rotator cuffs or strains, because that will happen and that can happen. A lot of the time, it's just more impingement strategies,
Hmm.
shoulders being out of
Like
place.
it's just
Posture,
hurting them to bench in general,
it could doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be bench. It could just be, hey, they're coming in, their
or
shoulders tight,
press.
or a row it's
Hmm.
tight. They're just bodies out of good posture. So I've noticed it creates impingement strategies through shoulder joints, which that is a big precursor to shoulder injuries. So if you keep going through there, you could have some injuries down the line. But it's never necessarily like pain in the shoulder is a rotator cuff injury. I think it's like it's the body's way of saying, hey, before you do anything else, something's not right here, because I'm giving you a nerve signal that it could be a muscle, tendon, it could be some part of the body isn't responding to something, and you're just standing, not doing anything. Now, if it comes to movement, say we're flat on a bench press and we're coming down, we're benching, and people feel the shoulders are a pinch. That could be okay. Now let's change position and let's change the posture of the scap, the rib cage, the spine, the head. It can be whatever, and see if it goes away and feels better. So I think people need to not just jump to conclusions, say, hey, I can't do this because my shoulder hurts,
Hmm.
but why does my shoulder hurt? And can I do
Right.
this just in a different movement pattern? Just similar to our landmine press, I like to go to landmine press a lot more often than a straight overhead press, because a shoulder press, a lot of people like to create compensation patterns and compress that shoulder into its sockets to be able to move a weight overhead, which is not ideal. So I start them on a landmine so they understand, okay, this is how mechanically you should move it going up at a degreed angle. And can you control that coming down? And then you eventually work to this overhead position with the arms.
Yeah. Um, a lot of times people are kind of unaware of their scaps and what they're doing. Um, and I like also using,
Or what they're not doing.
Yeah, right. I like also using these bubble benches we have that are really soft and gushy, and people can really feel their scaps working and depressing, and it almost allows for a cleaner feel into the press for some people. Because what typically I find a lot of people just watching members even will um, get in this position where they have a really high arch in their lower back and their head is off the bench and their shoulder blades aren't even depressed and in their slid down in their back pockets, so to speak. Their shoulders are up more their ears, and they're already pressing from a poor position with their scapula and poor shoulder mobility. And one thing that's important to think about shoulder mobility in your scaps is your smaller muscles' ability to keep your scapula in place, so the larger muscles can do the work. So a lot of the times, we do things like scap push-ups to help break up that tissue in your upper back and also help teach you where to set your scaps, because your shoulders are in between your chest and your back. And a lot of people aren't aware of how to calibrate where that position should be so that you're pressing with the larger muscles and not just pressing with all shoulders. So doing things like YTWs or a single arm scap retraction and then bringing the band down into your pocket or the cable can help strengthen what's called your subscap and your teres minor, teres major, and your serratus, which all help keep your shoulder girdle in a healthy, stable position so that when you press, instead of that falling out of position and you're using more like front delt and just muscling it up, you're actually gonna be using proper technique and using your whole body, and your core will be engaged better. And yeah, so for what it's worth, having a routine around healthy shoulder positioning is going to just make you a better presser.
Yes.
um, it's really easy to think about back because you're just thinking about retracting your scaps already. But a lot of times people forget that when you're doing your pressing, you're pressing from your back. Your spine is back there. Your basal root ganglia and motor function networks are back there. Everything from your central nervous system down to your peripheral nervous system is coming through your spine. So you're really pressing from your back. And it's important to activate those smaller muscles because, as Eric has said in previous podcasts, the smaller muscles allow the larger muscles to do the work. And without the smaller muscles, you actually forfeit strength and you create compensations.
And the key word that you use multiple times in that, and I love this word, is position. Those smaller muscles help maintain position so the larger muscles can function on a full system. Now, if we don't have correct positions, that's when compensation happens all the time. If you can't position
Mm,
that scap on that rib cage correctly, you might have some upper trap or anterior delt issues. You might have some grinding of a shoulder joint, and
right.
that
And
is
you and
key.
Right, right. It might be more than just activation. So
Right.
what kind of the stuff we were talking about? It might be more that you need some serious myofascial release and deep tissue and soft tissue work,
Or
and you need a lot of stretching and mobility work before you can even properly activate things to be in a good position.
well, it could
And
even activate. You just have to activate in correct position. So the other thing you said that was great is feeling. Feeling is how you're going to learn. So feeling the shoulder blades down and back towards each other, and then do an activation exercise of that, you're going to get much more out of just doing an activation exercise without thinking and feeling, because feeling and position will go hand in hand. So your body learns and can sustain that movement pattern. So the next multiple times you go do that, it knows this is the pattern you want it to be in. This is how it's going to move. This is how it's going to feel. If there was no pain and it felt correct, let's learn that, and we should be good.
yeah, I I want to get into fasting because it's another important topic, but I think we should maybe list a couple of our favorite shoulder mobility drills and shoulder scap activation techniques. So um, I like getting down in a tabletop position or a quadruped position. So your hands are on the ground, your shoulders are stacked over your hands, your knees are on the ground, your hips are stacked over your knees, and um, you're gonna take a foam roller and put your hand on it, and then put your forearm on it, and you're gonna glide your arm along the foam roller and really do like a single arm shoulder roll, and you'll get your tricep and your lat stretched out, and you'll start to actually drive your chest down. The idea is to kind of separate your shoulder from your chest, or separate your chest from your rib cage to keep your rib cage down but get that shoulder overhead mobility. And then and single arms, you get to work one side or the other. I also like getting on the side, like laying on your hip and reaching that arm over the foam roller and rolling out that lat, that teres minor, teres major, and kind of that insertion point right near your armpit there as well. Another one for some self myofascial release, so you can get that shoulder mobility. And then for activation, I love, again, the scap push-ups. Helps with scap retraction. I also love arm bars. Really love taking a kettlebell or a dumbbell. You're laying on your back. You're stacking your fist over your elbow. You're making a fist. You're stacking your hand over your shoulder. You're pulling your shoulder blade back and down. So I like to consider it back into my back pocket. And you feel that serratus, that little gill on your rib cage there, and you feel your lat, and then you punch the ceiling, kick that leg over your opposite leg, and turn. So you're stacking, you're laying down, so you're stacking now shoulder, shoulder, elbow, hand, all on top of each other, and then you rotate back and bring that shoulder blade back to the ground. And you keep rotating back and forth and creating that stability in the shoulder so that you have proper mobility rather than just flexibility. And you do one arm at a time there, so you can really see if you have any um, issues left versus right. All right. My favorite topic, because I am someone with autoimmune and digestion issues, ulcerative colitis since 2015. Um, and fasting is such a beautiful way to give your digestive system a rest. Think about how good you feel when you take a weekend off, how revitalized you feel when you go back to work. And on our digesting lasts anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. And if we do that 3 times a day, 7 days a week, indefinitely, we never give our digestive system a break. A lot of beautiful things come from fasting. We talk about stem cell production. We talk about autophagy, which is basically your internal house cleaning system. Um, we talk about ramping up your human growth hormone. We talk about improving hormone function, linking up the clocks of your digestion and other metabolic processes. There's a cascade of benefits from fasting. And I think a good place to start is Dr. Jason Fung and his Complete Guide to Fasting book. It's just such a, pun intended here, a very easily digestible way to understand fasting, because you come at it from a very scientific approach and a very compliance driven approach, so that it makes it easy for people to execute and to understand and to learn how it'll fit into their lifestyle based upon their goals and their starting point.
And for fasting, there's many different kinds of fasting. You have alternate day fasting. You have modified fasting regimens. You have time restricted feeding. All of these fall under fasting. So, kind of going over like alternate day fasting would be fasting for one day, no calories or minimal calories are consumed, and then the next day you're back to your normal eating. Um, Studies have shown that in a 1 day fast results in about 30% reduction in energy intake 3 days post fast. So you're kind of creating this habit of less energy intakes, and there seem to be some good improvements of HDLs during a fasting state, triglycerides. That's 1 day alternate day fasting can be tough for some people because it seems to me just too quick. And diet also plays a huge role in fasting. So you can fast for whatever many hours, but if you're coming back off the fast and you're right back into a high fat, high processed carbohydrate diet, it's not the best thing for your system. You can still create this metabolic dysfunction and obesity through the diet. So just because you're fasting doesn't mean you can eat whatever you want on the other side. And I think that's a big thing because people think, oh, I'm just going to fast the next day and not eat anything. Yes, you might see weight loss, but it's not going to change metabolically how you function if you're still creating a diet that isn't optimal. So diet plays a huge role in this, and research has shown that it plays a huge part in everything that we're talking about.
There's a great video on YouTube called Best Ways to Break a Fast by Thomas Delauer, Delauer, I think. And it does talk about how to best way to break a fast is with some lean protein if you're looking to just build muscle, but also to build a stronger system. So it is a really good way. Um, and I like the analogy of kids playing in a playroom and toys. So if kids are playing in a playroom and they have a bunch of toys in there, they make a big mess, and you go and give them more toys, well, the mess just gets worse and worse. Same thing with digestion and the inefficiencies. There are byproducts of waste of parts of proteins, parts of fats, all these other organisms and um, parts of food and chemicals that stay in the digestive tract and stay in our bodies, and free floating radicals in our system floating around. And autophagy is our body's natural ability of cleaning house or cleaning up the toys in the room. So when we say, well, listen, body, we're not going to give you any more toys, um, it forces the kids basically to then play with what they got or clean up, right? Clean house. That's kind of the idea. And then the next thing you give them a huge Lego set and makes a big mess again. But if you give them one toy, it's not going to make a big mess. And that's kind of the idea. Is you want to break your fast with clean, healthy things so that your body is saying like, okay, we just cleaned house. We just went through autophagy. We got rid of some of these free radical cells. We got the body to use some cytokines to clean things up, and then we also, um, you know, told weak and dying cells to just die off, and we gave the resources that we did have to the stronger, healthier cells. And now we only have a limited amount of protein. Like, let's fortify and strengthen. So you're really, again, this is a failure is success in progress point, because you're forcing your body to have to get better with what it's got in terms of um, a on a cellular level.
Mm. And it's big because that can promote potent changes in metabolic pathways, and that's what we're looking at, and especially in research is looking at for certain issues, diseases, and states that we kind of live in, and that is an important thing. We create that autophagy and basically cleaning of dead cells out of the body.
And we don't need to sit here and go on because we could go for hours telling you all the benefits of fasting. So I'm not here to try to convince you why fasting is so important and so crucial. It's in every single culture and religious doctrine in Mormons and Judaism and Christianity. It's written in pagans. It's written into their culture. Some type of fast in some sort of traditional way. In Hinduism, Buddhism, it's written into the routines and the lifestyle and the practices because it's just so important for the body to experience that and figure out how it needs to make changes and improve and necessity is the mother of invention, so it's the only way to really get it to do its job on a systematic, on a cellular level. So I think one thing I want to say is um, there's definitely a lot of good literature out there that says that majority of the population has leaky gut, and this is the best way to heal leaky gut because you're essentially, if leaky gut is a boat, sailing through the ocean with a hole in it, you're stopping the boat, you're patching the hole, and then you're fortifying and then reintroducing food to keep the boat going, bailing out the water and not letting more water get back into the boat. So I think the best way for compliance and get people to maybe try fasting is start with eating dinner earlier and pushing your breakfast the next day to later, and then try pushing your breakfast later and later until it's a brunch, and then you're skipping breakfast and it's just a lunch, and then you're pushing lunch back, and then you're going dinner to dinner. Now you've gotten a 24-hour fast in, and the a lot of benefits do happen in that 16 to 24-hour fast. A big study that came out of MIT a while ago that talked about stem cell production, and stem cells are your newest, youngest, most versatile cells, and you're actually spiking your stem cell production after a 16-hour fast, but even tenfold after a 72-hour fast. So yeah, there are things that you want to do to then get yourself to that 24-hour fast, but then there are ways that you can educate yourself and work with medical professionals to make sure you can get the benefits your body may need from a longer uh, administered fast.
And even if they aren't those long, I mean, we're still innately, our body's like designed to do this. It's designed to be in this fasted state. So, and I always tell people, we fast every night. People just don't realize it. It's just not for long periods of time. But when we're
Right.
sleeping, now this is depending on what we're eating prior. So, sleeping from when you time you go to sleep to you wake up, you're basically in a fasted state. So, if people are going to the doctors like, "Hey, we have to draw blood for glucose, whatever," they're like, "I want you in a fasted state." So that means no eating and whatnot prior to that. So they want to see what your levels are in a fasted state. Now that's all good, but where we as humans can throw this off is if we're consuming energy outside normal feeding phases. Now
Mm.
we have circadian rhythms and a circadian biology. Now, as life has evolved and we have technology and lights and TVs, we're kind of throwing off this 24-hour light dark clock that we have inside ourselves. And we do the same thing with food. And if we start to consume food later in the evening, later at night, we can actually be disrupting that energy balance and actually throwing off what our body naturally wants to do. So if we people listen, we need to be careful of how late we're potentially eating and what we're eating that late because that can affect how our circadian rhythms function and that can affect how fasting can affect us. So if you're eating right before you go to bed and your bodies might be breaking that down, it might not even be in a fasted state for 4 hours, depending how much you sleep. So that's going to be play a major role into it. So with people starting to think about or getting into fasting, they also need to think about food choices and then when they're eating, because that is a big thing. And we obviously want to try to synchronize as best we can our oscillations in our circadian clock for gene expression. Because if we don't have that, then that can screw off screw up a lot of mechanisms of energy metabolism, and it can mess with body weight regulation. So as best we can try to get that in line, we'll be better. And for most of the population, it's good. The only thing I tell people is if your children don't really need to fast. I mean, they're in this growing state, so it's not ideal for them. I mean, their body's growing. And then obviously old or underweight adults, probably not the best thing to do, because then we start getting into this issue with sarcopenia and weight loss, muscle mass loss, and that leads to possible causes, early causes of death, falls, and all that stuff. So really, if you're an adult from, I would say, from 18 to, I would say, probably 60, maybe 60 plus, you can get away with it. I mean, you can fast. You can 100% fast multiple hours. You can try different things. It's There's research that shows that certain hours work. But remember, we're on this balance of good feeding in for fuel and then restricting fuel so we can be efficient through energy pathways. It doesn't have to be a one for all or all for one. But I tell you, it can't be a one for all on the eating side. It can't be that, because then we screw up our whole system and we're just upregulating certain pathways that shouldn't be upregulated all the time. So this is where fasting is important. It can be done, test it out, have fun with it, but eat healthy on the outside when you're not fasting would be my recommendations.
Last thing I want to say, just to add to that, is the history of the word. It's in it. Breakfast, break fast. It was the break of the fast from supper to sunrise. And then the longest known fast was in 1971 by a man who survived. This was monitored by doctors and on certain supplements of yeast and sodium and different electrolytes. And this is an extreme case, but I want to just put it out there for people because I think we learn from these extremes. We learned from Icarus, right? 27-year-old man survived on water and supplements for 382 days, and he shrank from 456 pounds to 180 pounds. And he didn't have that elasticity and that loose skin because his body actually utilized everything in its system, and it used those extra, I believe they're the fat cells of the elasticity in the skin that create that drooping and that sagging skin, and it forced the body to actually use those things. Again, the necessity is the mother of invention, and you put your body, back it into a corner, and you will force it to do its job. So I just want to throw those 2 points out there because we're about ready to wrap up, and want give time for any wrap up words we want to say before our food for thought. So hit us, Menchie, if you got anything else you want to say about failing shoulder mobility or fasting today. I think we've really hammered this topic home.
No, I'm good. Try to push yourself every day, not to failure, but if you fail, you're okay, because you're going to learn. You're going to be better the next day. Failures each day are purpose in life. They should be there. They need to be there. And go find things you might fail at, because I guarantee you'll challenge you and you'll try to become better. Shoulder mobility, take care of the shoulders as best you can. Warm them up. Let them move. Let them move side to side, back and forth. Let them rotate. They have to keep moving. They're essential for movement. So keep that going. And then fasting, keep doing what you're doing. Fasting, try a little bit longer each day. Doesn't have to be every single day. Try it out. See if it works for you. If you're looking for weight loss, studies have shown that it works for weight loss. It works for health. And implement that into your dietary routine.
Yeah, anyone interested in making their body stronger will want to get use of their own stem cell production, which happens after 16 hours in a fasted state. It happens even more after a 24-hour fast and even tenfold after a 72-hour fast. Educate yourself, get someone to closely monitor it, or just slowly work your way up to it. And this week's food for thought, I felt it was very applicable. This quote by Vince Lombardi: "Winning isn't everything, but the will to win is everything." Thank you very much. Live long and prosper, people, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening. We hope you gained something from this episode. Our mission is to help people live their best life, both physically and mentally. Check out thinkfitnesslife.com for additional resources and schedule a complimentary assessment with one of us. We're always here to help.